Secure some price for Monday, February 3rd, 2025, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center. In this program, a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Secures alongside Blake Price, four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson, hitting switches, conducting things. You recovered from the weekend, buddy? There's a lot going on.
That was a wild weekend, and
couple emergency shows,
but just the snow added to the mix. I think everybody was fried a little bit by what happened over the weekend.
You know when your brain hasn't really switched on when you wake up and you're looking at your phone and you're like, God, I thought I almost saw Shams Charania with a Luka Doncic trade. Anyways.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot going on, not just for the Vancouver Canucks, but in the world over the weekend.
It's true.
There was also...
It's like a head shake kind of weekend.
Exactly.
What was real, what wasn't.
Also saw all those memes. George Lucas had it right. Starts with the trade war. Anyways, we'll leave that aside.
Who's Palpatine?
Oh, you know who's Palpatine. In fact, there's a visual similarity. Okay. Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. After 2 weekend trades, are the Canucks a better team? Yes or no? You can vote at the Carson Price X and YouTube channels. Blake Price, what says you?
I know what people are going to say. I'm going to shake free of the conventional wisdom here, and I'm going to say that they are a better team. They lost the best player in all the weekend wheeling and dealings. No question about it. But what they did in securing their blue line, I think unlocks a lot of things for them. In addition, I think you've upgraded, and this is not to beat on the local guy, but I didn't see a fit here for Denton Heinen. It wasn't working out. Drew O'Connor seems through one game at least to be an upgrade there. Even on a quiet night where you don't get any points, I think you're going to notice Drew O'Connor more than you will Denton Heinen. And as much as Hedl on the resume is a downgrade from JT Miller, I think there's a lot of good reasons, and Thomas Drance did a great article on The Athletic outlining a lot of the reasons for optimism around the Hedl acquisition. I think it's closer. And in 2 years' time, God, it could be Hedl ahead of Miller. So I'm going to say, even in the right now, I think they are marginally better than they were, yes.
As I've said many times on this show, I do not believe in the old hockey man adage that whoever gets the best player wins the trade. I say that because we're now in a cap world, and so if you can get multiple pieces...
completing your puzzle.
Exactly. Yeah. There are avenues to quantity usurping quality. But I voted no on this poll. I voted no on this poll in part because the general manager couldn't answer in the affirmative. Patrick Allvin was asked this on Saturday and said, well, we're a different team. And that's entirely true. And I think there is a pathway here to the sum of the component parts making the Canucks better than what we have seen so far this year. It is going to be obviously in a different style than having a couple of top centermen, if we can still call Elias Pettersson that. And of course, the other part here is that's a really expensive price to pay if Marcus Paterson is a rental, right? And I know that's not exactly germane to the question, but I do want to see a little bit more evidence here how Paterson works out here. Marcus Pettersson, that is. Mm-hmm. Andrew O'Connor. It's a no for now. We'll see. We'll see how the final 30-some games go here.
We're going to get to what's next for the Canucks, but I think his answer that you're referring to there was we're a different team right now. but the puzzle's, again, not complete, and he knows in his brain what his next move is.
Well, the puzzle is not yet complete, but there's an awfully big puzzle piece missing at center ice. A number 2 centerman. I mean, heck, if Elias doesn't get it back together, you're on the market for a number 1 centerman. If Heedle's fantastic and Elias gets his mojo back, then maybe it's just the third line center, which is easier to fulfill. But nevertheless, and of course, as we talked about on our emergency show Saturday, well, let's see how the next 5 weeks go, right?
Yep.
Like, if you lose ground from here, you might be looking about trading Brock Besser and Pius Suter and Derek Forward and Kevin Lankin and some of your UFAs. Our friends at Surrey Mitsubishi have a special program exclusively for the scarce and price audience. If you've been turned down for financing at other dealerships, Jessica, a dedicated representative, is going to assist in getting you approved on a new Mitsubishi. Bad credit, negative equity on your current car. Jessica going to apply the special program for you. Do everything possible to make sure you are approved. Email Jessica at surreymitsubishi.com. Make sure you mention Sakaris and Price. Some conditions apply. Surrey Mitsubishi 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey. Our top story brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. He's won the power struggle. Now there are no more excuses for Elias Pettersson. He's got to get back to being a 100-point or first-line centerman, or the Canucks are screwed, and he may be the next man out. We got a couple examples here, Blake, over the weekend. The loss to Dallas on Friday, and then the overtime loss to Detroit on Sunday. He was damn good against Dallas. An assist, 3 shots, 80+% of the expected goals for, on ice for 16 shots versus just 3 against, on ice for 30 chances versus 14 against, and 17 high dangers. Or scoring chances versus 6 against. Versus Detroit, he does get on the board with an assist, but it's 45% of the expected goals for. The on-ice shots, 6-8 against him. The on-ice chances, 6-6. The high dangers, 1-2 against him.
Just a very meh kind of night.
Yeah. And I noticed this tweet from an account I recognize, but that is a 1-shift, 1-shot, 1-goal game against the Red Wings. That is where you need your frontline players, your best players. How many times have we seen JT Miller do this, to take a hold of that game and be the difference, right? Like, that's why you pay these guys the big bucks. That's why they are prominent players, that in scenarios, situations like that, they rise to the occasion. Wasn't able to do it. They get their loser point. More on that coming up. Elliot Friedman reporting that Canucks players got together early on in the season in Florida and tried to see if Miller and Paterson could get on the same page. And that's interesting, Blake, because that was awfully early in the season, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That was October.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was after 2 games.
But that might have been, what I wonder if that is, Matt, is, guys, we saw how close we were last year. Mm-hmm. We can't let anything get in our way. So maybe that was an attempt to be preemptive rather than reactive.
Sounds that way. I mean, I certainly hope so, although I think there might have been signs at training camp as well.
No, totally. Like, I don't think it's without crumbs of something happening, but clearly somebody in that room thought, hey, this might be a possibility that this could be a powder keg. Let's try to diffuse immediately. Just wanted to make a comment on his play. I actually didn't mind DeBrusk and Besser last night. He really struggled, and to me it's weird because I felt like DeBrusk and Besser, as much as they were kind of forcing it at times, like I think Philip Hedl carrying the puck with speed was infectious, and to a degree O'Connor and Sherwood being back and showing their speed, I think it got infectious of playing at pace. I saw guys skating at pace we haven't seen skate at pace in a long time, and I thought I saw DeBrusk and Besser both skate hard and skate fast and with the puck and not willing to just dump and chase. But for some reason, the guy that stood out like a sore thumb was Paterson. I didn't see him skate with that enthusiasm and confidence, which is a little weird. That was opening night in a lot of ways for the Vancouver Canucks. The curtain comes up last night on that team. Everybody knows that all eyes are on them. And I thought everybody answered the bell except for him. Really. I mean, I saw enough from DeBrusk and enough from Besser on his line that I was like, okay, a little snake bitten, a little here, a little there, and it goes differently. But Pettersson himself, a little off.
Elliot further reporting, and look, I think everybody knew this. Something happened after that Nashville game where JT Miller was benched, preceding his 10-game leave of absence. There was some.
I don't think it matters anymore, Matt, but
Well, Elliot can't detail what happened.
No, I'm saying I don't think what I'm about to say, I don't think matters much, but I think we should stop calling it a leave of absence. It was a suspension. I think it was. Like I think they
sanitized it for JT's ego and pride, which, as we know,
and reputation.
Quite easily. Yes,
I think they wanted to make sure this wasn't going to follow him around for the rest of his career.
Well, they were also, I think, probably knew that meant they were going to have to trade him,
right? And trading a guy that they have suspended.
Yeah,
But I think that's effectively what it was.
Yeah, and the next day we were a little bit surprised by some of the commentary from players, including Elias. Remember, he said, "Well, all of us have something going on." Mm-hmm. That it wasn't quite as sympathetic if it was in fact a leave of absence, some sort of mental break. And the other thing, and I've seen others red circle this, and we have certainly cocked eyebrow at this. Patrick Allvin, for a couple of years now, has talked about creating a, quote, safe environment.
In the room, yeah.
Yeah. And when he first started using that, I just wondered, okay, is it just he's using an imprecise word here in his second language, or he's taken a Swedish word that doesn't quite literally translate. But he used it again on Saturday, and he's used it enough over his tenure
4 or 5 times
that I think there has to be something there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think that has to be an intentional word when describing the Vancouver Canucks culture and dressing room. But Horvat chimed on this for free, telling the Hockey News, quote, "I was honestly shocked. I can't believe it had to come to that, to be honest with you," echoing pretty much about just about everyone, right? "It's unfortunate they had such a great year last year, making it to the second round after being first in the Pacific. It's unfortunate that they had to get broken up like that. It sucks. It sucks that Miller's coming to the Metro. He's a heck of a player, but obviously something had to be done, and they made it. They made it happen."
Yeah, so that's an honest quote from Bo as usual, and I think he genuinely thought that this was a team that could have been held together. I don't. No, I think
I don't
he did
for a reason. I think
he saw
I think
the
Bo
issues.
knew exactly what JT was
for sure.
and exactly how this was going to end. I think Bo was probably in lockstep with Brad Richardson. We may lose Petey because of the way that Miller addresses him.
I think he thought that as he left, but I think after watching from afar the season that they had last year, like the rest of us, I think he thought it was behind him.
Yeah.
And I don't blame anybody who thought that for thinking that. I mean, that season should have cinched it. That you guys don't have to be best friends,
right?
But if you pull on the rope in the same direction, good things can happen.
Thing is, though, it was more than Elias. That's come to light here too. So I think it was only a matter of time. And frankly, as we talked about on our Friday emergency show, I don't think anybody's in the least bit surprised it's the Rangers either. I think it was always going to be the New York Rangers.
Yeah, and he's had a great start with 4 points in his first 2 games. Neighborhood Brewing has released the Wild Wild Extra Pale Ale in collaboration with New Country Radio there in the Okanagan. It's crisp, hoppy, and crushable brew for all the Wranglers. So go grab some. perfect to share with your wild amigos. It's the Wild Wild Extra Pale Ale.
3-2 overtime loss to Detroit. Now, here's the thing. In regular times, an injured Quinn Hughes is like the banner war font headline with the Vancouver Canucks. He did take the pregame skate and was a late scratch after warm-up. I suspect he will play tomorrow against Colorado. If he doesn't, we have a huge story on our hand, of course, and if he has to miss any time from here, that could easily affect the Vancouver Canucks deadline plans. But we'll see about morning skate tomorrow. We'll see what Tocchet has to say about
Also,
it.
all the Four Nations teams are all doing their injury replacements today, and nothing on the American front. So that's good news. That he looks like he still intends on playing.
His agent told Donnie and Dolly wants to play, and of course they all do. There's no news there. The news would be if he is having second thoughts, if there is something that would prevent him from playing, and there's been none of that.
Yeah,
at least none specified. Carson Soucy was a healthy scratch, and this was a heck of a spot to choose to scratch Carson Soucy. I do think there's probably a significant message being sent. Well, there is a message being sent here from Rick Tocchet, and we'll hear from him in a second. But the surprise being that he scratches him on a night when Quinn Hughes is scratched. Like, if you're Carson Soucy, you go, whoa. I realize we've acquired a couple new defensemen here, one who was in the lineup last night, but I can't play on a night where Quinn Hughes is scratched as well. Here's Tocchet on why he scratched Carson Soucy.
Yeah, I just think that he needs a reset. I think he's had a tough go here. He was a big part of the team last year. He's been struggling a little bit. I just felt that we got to get a little bit more compete from him. That's all. But sometimes players need a reset. Step away from the actual game, practice, do some video with footy, and kind of get your, like I said, the refresh. Everybody, get that refresh button. Start at zero.
Well, and Tocchet was also talking about resets for the whole team when you make trades to the ilk of the Vancouver Canucks trades on Friday. Okay, more on the game here in a second, but first, I just want to get to this. I am most uncomfortable with anthems being booed, period, regardless of political context. I'm particularly uncomfortable with booing somebody else's anthem, and I am even more uncomfortable than that with booing an anthem that is being performed by a singer, in this case a person of color in a wheelchair for Black Excellence night at Rogers Arena. I understand it happened in the nation's capital. I suspect it's going to happen
in Calgary.
Elsewhere. I just think it's poor form. Be better, rise to the occasion, stand silently. There are so many different ways that we can go about our most recent difference with the United States than booing the Star-Spangled Banner. And I did see Cam Robinson had a good tweet on this, that the NHL and its member clubs are by no means going to stop playing both anthems right now. But you may see a scenario where there is no singer of the American anthem in the Canadian rinks, just so that no individual. I felt for the young lady last night. You're not a regular anthem singer. That's a significant stage and spotlight for you, and you've got these boos cascading down. It's just.
I'm sensitive to that side of it. If it goes to a recorded anthem, boo the F away. I could give a rat's ass at this point.
Yeah,
consequences for actions. Consequences for actions. You also don't allow somebody to start talking about annexing your nation. So,
I don't want to get too deep into this, but it would appear that even people within his inner circle understand how stupid an idea this is.
He's saying it again today. So
but there's 340 million Americans. The boo is not just directed at one person, and I guess that would be my point.
Two super chats to get to here.
Yes. Well, just before that, Noah Strang, one of the loudest renditions of "O Canada's" heard at Rogers Arena, said loud cheers at the start and the end, lots of singing along. A more constructive way. I was pleased to hear that.
Yeah, for sure.
Because this is more about supporting your country than it is about, at least for me, shitting on another.
Canucks fan 94 from late on the Saturday pod that we never had a chance to get to. While the D has been somewhat retooled, I think they should still try to go and get Bowen Byram from Buffalo if possible. And the problem I have with that is you're committing then to playing him or Marcus Pettersson exclusively on the offside when healthy, because you've got legitimate – those are four great players in the top four, but somebody's playing offside there between Roenick, Hughes, Byram, and Pettersson. Are you okay with that?
I just think it's going to be too expensive to acquire Bowen Byram. Like, you're number one, it's going to be expensive in trade costs. Number two, it's going to be expensive in contract. And number three, as you note, that's another left side guy. And particularly after you saw the game from Elias Pettersson, DPD.
Well, I was curious. So
with Hughes, Marcus Pettersson, and Elias Pettersson, and of course you got Forbert there as well, and Soucy. I feel a lot better about the left side of this defense. Now, if Byram is wholly comfortable playing the right side, in perpetuity, basically here, because of all the left side guys they have, and you can get them at a decent trade cost and on a decent contract, but there's so many ifs there.
I was curious as to how people saw this playing out. So
especially when you need that second line center. Right?
I just tweeted out, assuming the top four in the Canucks is Hughes, Myers, Pettersson, Roenick, what is your third pairing? And you've got Forbert, DPD, Soucy, Juleson, Mancini as sort of the lead candidates there. And I'm telling you, it is the biggest mix of people's opinions, except for one guy. People are drunk on DPD.
Yeah.
He is in every single person's
of course. The
incarnation.
The shiny new toy. Plus a young D they drafted and developed, right? That's what you need. That's what you want.
You'd think they would have. I mean, they haven't seen Mancini play, but, like DPD is everywhere. Second super chat. Thanks again to Scott G. Weaponize your cap space. Bring in an overpriced player who's underachieving. Get a sweetener from that team. An overpaid player may play better with the Canucks. I mean, in concept, I don't hate that idea, Scott, but you just have to tell me which guy you're thinking about, because they're not all created equal, the underachieving overpaid player.
Yeah.
You have the cap space, is Scott's point.
Yeah, they do. I'm not there yet. And frankly, I think, is it 10 games before the trade deadline? Including the 3 this week, and then coming out of the Four Nations break where you got a pretty tough roadie. Back-to-backs in Vegas and Utah, and then back-to-backs later in the week in L.A. and Anaheim. So I sort of want to see some evidence here that the Vancouver Canucks are going to make a push for the playoffs before I start fashioning trades that are about this year and this year only. As for Hedl, a Miller-esque turnover in the first. O'Connor couldn't get the puck out on the wing's second goal, but they played with pace and puck carrying. I mean, Hedl's size-speed combo certainly stands out. He was their best centerman last night, and he scored the game-tying goal midway through the third, and boy, was he stoked. Here's the new guy, Philip Hedl, on all the emotion behind that celebration.
That meant a lot to me. In that moment, it was so many emotions in my head, and I said, I want to build on that and keep working hard every day and be even better than today.
I was excited watching, honestly.
Ditto.
Every time he touched the puck with his speed and his refusal to give up the puck, I loved it.
And like, think of it from his perspective. First of all, you're still relatively young in your life. You were drafted and developed by the New York Rangers. You have only known that as a home market. You get traded. Okay, well, my stuff, where am I going to live? Like all the different things that would swirl around a move, anybody moving cities. But you get those 2.5 hours of refuge, right, where it's just about the game. Of course, you want a goal. You want to do something that gets the attention of your new teammates, your new coaches, and your new fans. And so I can understand in that moment how much it meant to them.
Tocchet may have done this, but if I'm Rick Tocchet, I pull him in after the game. Say, 3 minutes, Philip, come see me. And I say, kid, that was great. You played amazing. And we want things to work out for you. And this is the hardest thing in the business, and I'm speaking as Rick Tocchet now. I know how hard it is to do this on a nightly basis, but you need to find a way to make that your average game. Like, you're not going to score every time, but you need to play like that. And I think that's all that separates Filipino from living up to his draft type and all that sort of stuff, is that needs to be the bar for Filipino. Mm-hmm. And now he wasn't given opportunity in a lot of places in New York. He rarely got power play time, rarely got top six time. So that's just going to unfold naturally for him here anyway. He's going to be given more opportunity here, but he's got to rise to the occasion. And I think it probably wouldn't hurt for Rick Tocchet to sort of just put it in the lights for him.
Yep.
Say that, like, you got a new bar here, kid.
Tocchet said he hopes some of Hedl and O'Connor's rush attack and controlled entries rubs off on the rest. I mean, Hedl attacking with Wyatt Arndt put it out there. Hedl attacking with speed and puck control, not being afraid to go around or through guys with dekes is goddamn refreshing. Yes, it is.
Yes.
Tocchet called Marcus Pettersson terrific, said he could really stabilize the D, and then DPD, as we have talked about here. A career high 60 minutes and 12 seconds. He played 4 more minutes than Noah Juleson. The Corsi 4 was 78%, 25-7. The shots 14-2 while he's on the ice. The expected goals 93%. I mean, it was just
scoring chances 14-2, high danger scoring chances 8-0, obliterated the rest of the team. Yeah. 8 and none against.
Mm-hmm. Whew. And speaking of carrying the puck in with 46 controlled zone entry attempts, 41 of them successful. Of the 37 uncontrolled attempts, only 7 successful. Now, you're going to see that by way of splits, because dumping and recovering the puck is not necessarily the highest percentage play. It does and can work. It's a good defensive tactic. It doesn't often lead to clean possession and scoring opportunities, but do it enough. It's a law of averages approach. Here's the thing, though. The Canucks 23, 18, and 11, they got a gift from Detroit in terms of beating the Calgary Flames on Saturday night. Mm-hmm. But it was a really short turnaround for the Wings. And you would think they had a tired club they could have taken advantage of.
Well, they did. They dominated the game, but they just couldn't
score.
But they dominated the game.
Okay.
I mean, you play that game 10 times, they win that game 9 times. No question about it. It's frustrating they didn't. You're allowed to be frustrated, but they did everything last night.
And, of course, missing Hughes in the overtime really shows up, too.
100%.
Right? I mean, he is...
Well, all game long, but yes, especially in overtime.
Yes. So they're 2 points back of the Flames for the final playoff spot in the West. And they continue to track an NHL record for the most loser points in a single season.
Mm-hmm.
They have 11 losses now in overtime or the shootout. The record is 18. They still have 30 games remaining here.
That would have to be, that's a big chunk, 7 of 30. Last night's game doesn't irk you as much.
But here's the thing, Blake. I think you are going to see a lot of close games with this lineup and the way they're going to play. Like, I think you are going to, because I don't think they're blowing many people out.
No, they have to find their scoring touch.
I don't think they're scoring a whack of goals and being able to sit back and defend. Sure, there'll be a couple amongst the 30. You'll get all sorts of styles of games in there, or at least the styles of scores in there. But this is just, when you think back to last year and how many goals were going in and where they're at now, I'm not necessarily sure that you're going to be looking at the highest event, most entertaining hockey the rest of the way.
I'm going to hold out for optimism. I'm going to be optimistic here that when you have Hughes in the lineup, and all of this predicates on Hughes being in the lineup, but with the rest of the blue line configured as it is now, and Hughes in the lineup, I think offense does tick up. And we already saw it last night. I mean, the defense still keeping teams under 20 shots. They get to 30 shots. Like, last night was how it was supposed to look, and they didn't have Hughes. I think with Hughes, with his pinpoint precision passing, with his ability to score goals now, as we have seen, I think there is a chance for a turnaround in this regard. Last night's single point doesn't bother me as much as some of the other single points have bothered me. But the math is still there. If they were merely a 500 team, not even a winning team past 60 minutes, if they were merely a 500 team, they would be comfortably in the playoffs. Comfortably with insurance. It's disappointing, but
I look at the scoring from forwards though, Blake. Miller is the team leader at 35. That'll change. Garland 34, Besser 33, Paterson 33, DeBrusk 31.
But we're back to Pettersson. I mean, like, if Pettersson is Pettersson,
are we back to Pettersson?
Yeah, all
you
ships
can
rise.
Guarantee me?
No, I'm saying we're back to Pettersson being the topic here. Like,
right.
The season pivots on Elias Pettersson. All this was done. The JT Miller trade was done to release Pettersson from the stresses of the relationship, etc. If Elias Pettersson is not the Elias Pettersson that gets paid $11.6 million, no, it's going to be really tough to make the playoffs.
So, of the new guys, Heedle's going to wear 71. Marcus Pettersson wearing 29. He has worn 28 before, but of course, Luc Bourdon. Kyle O'Connor with 18. Victor Mancini wearing 90. Talkett saying they bring a freshness. There was lots of smiles in and around the room on Sunday. Marcus Pettersson, of course, a free agent. The AFP analytics on him project a 5-year deal at $5.8 million. Remember, the cap's going up, everybody. So some of these numbers are going to go, whoa, what's that for a second pair defenseman? No. Cap's going up. Dollywall says he expects something to happen here.
I don't hate that deal. 5 at 5.8.
How old is he?
He's 28 for the entire season. So
okay. Two things on that. You brought up a couple of them on our emergency show Saturday. But number one, him and his representative, they know they have the Canucks over a barrel here when you give up assets like that for a would-be rental. Number two, like let's see how he does here, right? We have brought in players with darn good NHL resumes in the past, only to watch them fall flat for whatever reason. Louis Eriksson on line one. Not saying he's that, but let's get some sample size here.
Good 26-minute debut, though.
Oh, it was
like 26 minutes.
In part because Hughes doesn't play, but yeah, of course.
Didn't get worse.
Marcus, we need you. We really, really need you.
Can you play like the entire game, maybe?
Exactly. Apparently they call him Dragon or the Dragon in Pittsburgh.
No.
Well,
I do not abide to use your terminology. Dragon? That's not a hockey nickname. We don't do that.
We slay dragons here. So more on that with Jeff later in the show. Dan Kingerski, longtime Pittsburgh scribbler on the Penguins, tweet, I liked Mike Sullivan's comment on Drew O'Connor. He gave several thoughts when he said, OC has another level to his game that is yet untapped. Maybe Vancouver can help him get there. And Kingerski says he'd advise Talkett to play him at center.
They said winger.
Alvin did. Yeah, no. Alvin said winger. They certainly have him poised for winger duty. But it's not like this center depth chart is impenetrable at this point.
Suter's not a tried and true have-to-play center. So you could flip that around.
I think Pius would say he's a natural center, but gosh, there's part of me that likes him better on the wing.
Got the good shot.
Yeah. Maybe I'm being a little too swayed by recency bias. not this weekend, but that he was scoring earlier in the season playing over on the
Well, we need to see OC's defensive conscious, but Pius Suter does have a defensive conscious, which is nice.
Frank Corrado mentioned this. We talked about this on our Friday emergency show, but Victor Mancini, and the tweet from Frank there, Mancini is more than just a throw-in for the Canucks. Big, strong, physical, can skate, mobile, isn't afraid to carry the puck, and can do it well. A raw talent, late bloomer who still has to prove it, but has all the necessary skills to do so. Saw him in person earlier this year and was impressed. You're going to want to hear what Darren Dreger has to say about Victor Mancini because, yeah, he is far from a throw-in in this deal. This is the Canucks professional scouts identifying a player below the NHL level, though he has played a handful of NHL games, and thinking, this guy could be a regular. Perfect world, he becomes the defensive version of Dakota Joshua, right? A guy who couldn't crack an NHL lineup every night elsewhere, but came here and became just that last year.
Check out my Twitter feed, too, by the way. I put a clip in there of Mancini setting up Hedl for a goal earlier this year, and there's a little bit of a Ray Ferraro scouting report built into that clip, so you can hear that too.
That's at Just Blake Price?
At Just Blake Price, yeah.
Just Blake Price.
It's just me.
JT Miller scored twice in his New York Rangers debut on Saturday. He added 2 assists in his second game as a Ranger Sunday. That one was a victory, whereas the Saturday one was not. They have taken his banner down at Rogers Arena. David Quadrelli noted, our friend from Canucks Conversation, Canucks Army, Miller's first shift as a Ranger has to be as dialed in as I've seen him in some time. Our buddy Wyatt Arndt. This just underscores how mentally checked out he was here at the end. Dude is fueled by his emotional state, and when he's on, he's fucking amazing. When it's off, he's a shadow of what he can be.
Yeah, he
said all the right things, incidentally, if you're wondering, because I know we referenced Bo Horvat earlier, and people are still sucking on that atmosphere.
He credited the Canucks organization for getting him to where he is and all that. And you know what? I don't think you get the same JT Miller if he was traded to the Carolina Hurricanes. I think the Blue Shirts are he would have been. I think he still has a chance for a good bounce back if he's anywhere else.
Yeah.
But I think the Blue Shirts is the perfect spot to get every drop of juice out of JT Miller, and they're going to, at least for a couple of years. I think he's going to be as good as he can possibly be. But his age is still a thing, and that's why I don't hate the move for the Canucks.
Yeah. David Pagnotta reporting that on Friday, the Canucks had discussed a move for Cody Ceci, who winds up getting traded with Michael Granlund from the Sharks to Dallas on Saturday. Between the Rantanen Necas deals, the 2 deals swung by Vancouver, the Sharks Stars trade, everybody who said there are teams anxious to get their moves in before the Four Nations, I think has been proven correct here. This could be a busy week. And just so everyone knows, the Four Nations break is not a roster freeze. You can make trades during that period, but it does look like there's some anxiousness and activity that is happening here and may continue to happen throughout the week. So stay tuned all week. Who knows what can happen here? There's still some really juicy names on these trade boards.
Let's go on record here. What's your guess for the Canucks in the second line center role, which I think is priority number one, especially we talked about Byram and stuff like that. Do you think there's a chance they do something big here before the trade deadline? Or even this week?
Yes. And if you were to pin me down on it, I would say it's either Ryan O'Reilly or Casey Middlestad. Because I think those are the 2 urgent situations. Mm-hmm. Brock Nelson is a rental, UFA rental. I mean, the Islanders were playing better hockey too. But Brock Nelson, if he is being moved, I'm not sure that's here because I think that's a pretty high price tag for a guy who I'm not sure would resign here. Cousins has so much term left and is having yet another uneven season that I think that's a difficult one to make before
that price is so high
plus
too.
He's $7 million, so that's like a lot of your cap space.
But the acquisition
I'm not
price there
sure.
is high too.
Yeah, and then, the Yanni Gourds, the Trent Fredericks, the Jean-Gabriel Pageaus, the Jake Evans, the Ryan Donatos, they're all out there, but I'm not sure they're quite of the muster that the Canucks need. O'Reilly, to me, in Nashville, just because we have heard Vancouver connected to him in the past, I think it probably behooves Barry Trotz to move him sooner rather than later with where the Predators are. I know he said he was going to treat him like he had a no-move or a no trade, wants him to be a part of the process. I have no idea how the Canucks feel about Casey Middlestad, but I know the Colorado Avalanche aren't exactly thrilled with him. So that might be a buy low possibility.
They would need to have another deal,
but I think
to fill it in, right?
Well, that's it. They're going to need a center back, and I'm not sure they're getting that.
Or
from
you
Vancouver.
give them the assets that they can flip somewhere else if they've got another center in mind.
Yeah,
but it's a lot.
I would be very, very coolish on giving them the assets to go replace a second line center. That would be a pretty high price to pay. They would absolutely have to really believe in Casey Middlestad.
That's a lot
to make
right
that
now.
deal. So to answer your question, bigger picture, no, I think it's probably a summer thing for them.
So, but you don't think they use up the space that they've got? Because they really don't need any more defense help right now. They've got salary caps.
Well,
you think you think that hangs on the vine? I think they'll bring in a rental at worst. And it won't be a sexy rental, but it'll be something.
Well, put it this way. Who was the super chat earlier? Like, if they tank from here, like if they're terrible from here, absolutely, I think they're going to be hanging on to cap space.
Yeah, possible.
Not to mention taking on bad contracts, bad expiring contracts, as the listener, as the super chatter noted. So, again, you've got some time here. You've got opportunities for evidence, 3 games here this week, and then that 4-game roadie at the end of the month. I think you take your time here. And Phil DiGiuseppe has cleared waivers. They've also papered DPD, Mancini, and Carlson Abbotsford in advance of tomorrow's game against
those 3 probably
Colorado.
Coming back up. We'll see.
One would think. Greta. Oh, boy, are we going to have some fun at Greta.
Lots
February
of Greta dates.
15th, Canada versus the United States. Come join us, 50 West Cordova. We're going to have all sorts of exciting prizes to give away. This one is in support of the Social Run Club YVR, our charitable partner. $10 snags you a ticket. If you want VIP packages, those are $40. Includes a burger, a beverage, a game card at the awesome arcade there. This is presented by Fountain Tire, and your tickets are at nationgear.ca. Doors at 4, puck drop at 5. February 15th. It's a Saturday. Canada, USA. Come meet us at 50 West Cordova. Greta Bar, let the games begin.
And that game's not loaded at all now. Both from a political and a JT Miller perspective. My goodness.
We'll see where Terra 4 goes between now and
Yes.
then. There's already been some movement on that a little bit. So come join us there. Darren Dreger is going to join us here momentarily. Jeff Paterson as well after a busy weekend. And in fact, Dregs with more on the path forward here for the Vancouver Canucks. Bet365, bet of the day. I have no idea. Oh, I suppose I picked the Super Bowl prop with Kelsey proposing to Taylor Swift on Friday. I have no idea what you picked on Friday, but I'm sticking with Super Bowl props. Kansas City, they rushed it 35 times against Buffalo, but 11 with the quarterback and twice with the wide receiver. They ran it just 22 times, so the exact same amount minus the 11 and the 2. In the divisional playoff against Houston. It's tough to run on the Philly D, and I think Andy Reid recognizes his best chances on Super Sunday. Ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands as opposed to Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. Casey under 25.5 rushing attempts Sunday. 110 wins you 100.
So I've been following how good Shea Gilgeous-Alexander's been playing. Well, this season, but especially in the last month or two.
Incidentally, did you see this after the Luka trade? untouchables in the NBA right now. Victor Wembanyama, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and maybe Jokic in Denver.
Giannis?
I don't know.
No?
With Luka can be traded.
Well, because of his market, they might need to liquidate a little bit. Do you know how far up the points ladder you have to go to get some cheddar on a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander points
I
bet?
remember. Like over 35?
Nope.
Over 36?
No, over 40.
Oh, my God.
Plus 190.
Wow.
For 40 points. If you only think he can get to 35 points,
There's no money there.
It's minus 130.
There's no money there. Open an account with Bet3. That's awesome.
Oh, my God.
It's a Canadian kid. And line setters think, you know what? 40. That's a good place to set.
And that's
it
against the Bucks, incidentally.
Yeah. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Darren Dreger coming up next. Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center.
And these days, you never know how much anything is going to cost going forward. So just don't leave it to chance. Plug in your car. Don't fill it up. And right now, the Toyota Pacific dealers want to remind you of the BZ4X, the newest addition to their all-electric lineup. And for those of you out Valley Way, HOV compliant, absolutely. So you're not only passing the pumps, you're passing all your friends on the highway as well. It is absolutely glorious. Glorious to drive in, too. Don't take my word for it. Just go and take one for a test drive. Once you sit in that cockpit and take it for a ride and feel the zoom when you put your pedal down, oh, my goodness. Go check it out. Again, all the incentives, $12,500 in rebates and incentives. You can finance one from 0.19% APR for 36 months. Shop Toyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer.
TSN's Darren Dreger is an NHL insider and, of course, one half of the Ray and Dregs hockey podcast. He joins us Mondays. Good to see you. Good to hear you.
Yeah.
Busy weekend. I'm sure it was. I want to almost do a blow-by-blow here on Friday night with you, Dregs. So it's like 8:30. Where are you when the JT Miller news break? Yeah, it's like 8 o'clock or whatever.
Or when you
it
get
is.
the first crumb,
Eastern
because he showed
time,
up. He showed up.
We all become aware that he gets scratched from the game against Dallas. Take us from there.
Yeah, I mean, I was at home, thankfully. That isn't necessarily the norm on a Friday night. You're out. You've had a busy week. Sometimes you're with friends. This time of year, though, I'm always a little bit cautious, right? It just had the feel of it. And, not to go back to the Carolina-Colorado trade, but that also happened, obviously, 2 Fridays ago now, right? So that happens, and then you're like, okay, that's a pretty stiff reminder that we need to be on full alert here moving forward. So, the Vancouver saga, everything around JT Miller, everything around Paterson, been so well documented, and we talked about it. And every day I'd check in, and the messaging that I'd get back was always kind of the same thing. Yeah, still lots of conversation. Don't know if it's going to happen in the next hour or if it's ever going to happen, right? And, then things started to percolate on Friday, to your point. And the reporting on this one across the board was solid. So as soon as we learned that Miller had been asked to waive his no trade, no move, verbally said yes, and then was quickly trying to get out of Dallas to rejoin his new club. Well, now you talk about, okay, well, what are the other elements that are involved in this trade? And all sides were pretty careful in this one. So again, what we learned was that don't get caught up on the main piece being JT Miller. Like, this is a much bigger deal than what you might think. So, when that information came in, then we started to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But I'll tell you this, fellas, and this isn't a knock on Chris Drury, because, automatically there are some of us, the opinionists in our world, who want to go hard after, okay, here's the winner, here's the loser. And instantly the reaction was, when the deal was made official, well, Vancouver didn't get enough in the return for JT Miller. But I can tell you that this is the deal, essentially the deal that the Canucks, Patrick Allvin, had been pushing Chris Drury on for well over a month. And it really came down to Victor Mancini. That's really what it came down to in the end. They knew they were getting that first-round draft pick. That's probably why they were so quick to flip over to the Pittsburgh Penguins and get that deal with Drew O'Connor and Marcus Paterson done. But it took till whatever that hour was on Friday, call it the 11th hour, doesn't matter. Maybe the 11th hour for Drury and the New York Rangers, where he went, all right, I'll throw in that piece. And that piece is Victor Mancini. And I think Canucks fans are going to grow into appreciating how good this kid is, because he's trending on being a second pair for sure in the National Hockey League.
Really? Wow. Yeah. More on that, Dregs. Who are you talking to there? What's the outlook for Mancini?
Well, that's it. And I honestly didn't know a whole lot about him, but as soon as this deal went down, Frankie Corrado, who I know you guys respect and have a lot of time for, instantly sent me a text message, and he goes, boy, said, I'm telling you, this Mancini kid is the real deal. And he made some comparisons in terms of who he thinks he's better than, who are pretty good players with the New York Rangers currently. I won't throw the names out there, but if Mancini comes anywhere close to the names that Corrado mentioned, then this guy's going to be legit. He's going to be the real deal. And I know, again, in following up, Vancouver thought, given the circumstances, that they did okay. They get a centerman back. They're going to probably try and add another centerman. That makes a lot of sense here. But they get a good young D back, and they managed to clean up the organization a little bit as well. So they like their collection of good young D. And overall, they like how the things kind of shook down when both trades were ultimately resolved and put to bed.
Yeah, we got the same text from Frank Corrado. He'll join us Wednesday as the president of the Victor Mancini fan club.
Retweeted a goal scored by Hedl on a fabulous feed by Mancini when Ray's calling the game, and Ray is glowing about Mancini's play throughout the course of that game. Ray saying in that clip, I haven't seen him live before, but boy, is he good. So there's some good things ahead. They get the first round pick, as you mentioned, immediately turn their attention to Kyle Dubas. And how long had those discussions been really on the front burner for the Vancouver Canucks?
I would think for a while, right? And isn't that interesting how things do link together? And it's not always one team making that big splashy trade like Colorado and Carolina that gets the dominoes falling. In this case, it's an internal game of dominoes. Obviously the Canucks needed that first round draft pick to execute the deal with Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins, and now you've got some, again, internal information and knowledge, Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin, in both those guys, in O'Connor and in Marcus Pettersson. And I don't know how hard Dubas was shopping Drew O'Connor, but his name has popped up with a number of teams. I heard Vegas had explored some interest, and then when Vegas, was basically gifted Brandon Saad, after the mutually terminated deal, it felt like that was maybe Vegas going in a different direction. Who knows? I mean, McCrimmon might add another forward there. But I think that's kind of what was gumming things up here. There would have been lots of conversations between Dubas and Allvin specific to those guys, maybe one of those guys, but the fact that they got both is impressive work.
And he looked good in his opener. The criticism had been that he doesn't finish. this year. He had a decent finishing year last year, similar numbers to Danton Heinen, who goes the other way.
Yeah.
But at least he's noticeable. Like, if you're not going to finish, at least show the buzzsaw. And Heinen was just a little bit too invisible on a lot of nights. And again, it's only one game for Drew O'Connor, but it's just nice to see a guy with that speed who's noticeable.
Well, and look, I'm telling you again, I mentioned Vegas, and I don't want to oversell that, but when you think of the Vegas Golden Knights and the style of hockey that they play, it is a heavier type of game, right? It's based on skill. I mean, you've got to have that complement of both. But if you've got really strong defensive-minded players, forwards, that play that structured style that Cassidy demands, like O'Connor's name had kind of been percolating around the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. And the reason I even throw that out there is, again, specific to a coach who likes that heavier brand of hockey. So I don't know that you're going to be able to lean on O'Connor as being a consistent secondary scorer, but most coaches are okay with that, provided the other elements of the detail of your game are there. And I think that Vancouver gets that in Drew O'Connor. And what is he, 26 years old? I mean, this kid is just nicely coming into his prime. And we know, because the organization has acknowledged, like, their preference, their intent is to extend those two guys who are pending unrestricted free agents. So we'll see.
Yeah, Mike Sullivan with some nice words about Drew O'Connor on his way out the door. Yes, 26 years old. So, Darren, what's your understanding of where the Canucks are now? They're looking to add you mentioned a centerman. They're looking to add a centerman to the existing group by the trade deadline and make a major push for this year's Stanley Cup playoffs, or are they still listening on Elias Pettersson?
I think they have to be listening. I kind of paused there because I don't want to undersell it, but I also don't want to oversell it. And I think that the preference right now is to just give Paterson and the group some time to heal and to breathe and to settle. And first of all, it starts with Elias Pettersson, right? Like, he's got to find a more consistent game. That's his job. That's his priority, because now all the excuses have been washed away. So there will be a higher level of expectation. But that expectation, if he isn't traded between now and, let's say, the off season, if you want to include the off season, is to focus on what can make his game better and what can make his game stronger. It's really difficult to get physically stronger in season because the schedule just doesn't allow it. But that will be priority one for Paterson. And the reason I'm not just flat out saying no, they're not interested in trading him at this point is because how many conversations did Patrick Galvin and Jimmy Rutherford have with so many different suitors that were interested in Paterson? Those conversations don't go away. How many times have we reminded when big deals happen? I think of Jack Eichel going from Buffalo to the Vegas Golden Knights, and Adams and McCrimmon acknowledging that deal had been in the works for months and months and months. So as we're having this conversation today, yeah, it doesn't seem likely, does it, that Pettersson will be traded? But based on the conversation that Alvin has had with so many different hockey execs, hey, we're still a month away from the trade deadline. Anything is possible.
Are there any hurt feelings in the room about how it all played out, do you think? Is the Miller faction in the room? Do you think they're upset at what's happened so far, or is everybody able to push the reset button at this point, do you think?
Well, I mean, that's the hope and that's the expectation. I mean, you're professionals, so find a way to, Ray always reminds me of this on the podcast. When you see teams go through dark patches, valleys, in what should be a better year, what normally needs to happen is each individual player has to take stock of his individual play. And as individuals, if you can play the role that Rick Tocchet is asking of you, and you do that on a consistent basis, then the sum of the parts should take over, and they should be a playoff team. So, when you asked a minute or two ago about, okay, well, what is the thinking now? Well, the thinking now is to continue to assess what this group is and where they are at. Of course, making the playoffs is expected in Vancouver, from top of the organization all the way to the bottom. But what's equally of value here is looking ahead to the start of next season and what that roster looks like, which again brings us back to maybe ongoing Elias Pettersson speculation. Because look, right now, Pettersson is not giving the Vancouver Canucks what they need. He's not up the middle of the ice, not offensively. So that then again spins the need for bringing in a more dependable or impactful center until Pettersson can take on more of that role. And let's not underestimate how much cap space does Vancouver now have.
They've got a fair bit now.
There you
Darren.
go, man.
That was one of the offshoots of all the dealing. Well, let me ask you about that because Brock Nelson's a rental. There's some more third-line profile rental guys that are out there, Gourde, Frederick, Evans, and some others. Middlestad, Cousins, and O'Reilly.
Yeah.
They're guys with term remaining, all of whom, I mean, second-line center might be a bridge too far for some of these guys, the way they're playing. Others have absolutely been that and more.
Yeah.
In their careers. Do you hear the Canucks connected to any of those guys? Do any three of those guys make sense for Vancouver, given the different composition of the team they have?
Yeah, well, I can make a case for all of those guys, but, really then what you have to boil it down to is which one of the names that you just threw out there is capable of being a second-line center. Right. And that's where it gets a little bit challenging. What is the status of Ryan O'Reilly with the Nashville Predators? I'm sure we'll be talking about that at some point this week on Insider Trading because things have seemingly gone quiet in Nashville. Does he still have the game required to fit in that 2 spot? And I think he does. Am I positive? No, I'm not positive. Philadelphia thinks they're getting a first-round draft pick for Scotty Lawton. On a lot of good teams, Scott Lawton would be a third-line center. That's really what he is. We're seeing the Philadelphia Flyers sell off some pieces now because they too are trying to acquire cap space. Philadelphia is recognizing a bit of unrest in that market. They want to give their fans something to focus on. So sure, they're selling hope, but they want to get into that game of big game hunting. And that'll come through free agency. So they're trying to move off some pieces. I think Ryan Strome with the Ducks, not a lot of activity from a media perspective around him, but that market is a tough one. Dylan Cousins, you mentioned. I had a conversation with somebody with the Buffalo Sabres this morning, guys. Okay, and if you're going after Dylan Cousins, what are you giving up? Pettersson? I'm asking honestly because Kevin Adams doesn't want futures attached to a trade that's going to send out Dylan Cousins. He's not. And he's getting 20 calls. 20 teams are interested in Dylan Cousins. And he's not even shopping him. But the message is, and Calgary's on that list, of course. It seems like Calgary's fixated on Dylan Cousins. Okay, well, who's going back the other way? Connor Zary? Like, I mean, if I'm Kevin Adams, I'm looking at one of the top young players for the Vancouver Canucks or the Calgary Flames or any of the other teams who have called in Dylan Cousins and saying, okay, well, that's what I need coming back to even engage in this conversation.
What's left in Trevor Zegras? Like, what is Trevor Zegras?
Well, he's an enigma for starters. You feel like you know what you should get offensively. Everybody around him talks like he wants and is still putting in the work to kind of polish up some of the other aspects of his game. I'm not sure that we see that on a continued basis. He's had some injury issues that he's had to contend with. I've poked around on Trevor Zegras probably 2-3 times in the last 2-3 weeks. And the message is that it's relatively quiet on him there. But that's not to say that can't change, with that phone call. But more likely things heat up in the offseason. But he's an interesting piece because, you're just not sure the way it's going to play out. I mean, nobody comes with any level of guarantee. But it also is getting to that place where it feels like he might need to change his scenery. So may not be a terrible bet.
Lastly, Darren, we heard Friday that the cap is going up $7.5 million for next year and some pretty sizable jumps thereafter if the CBA can be negotiated and everything stays the same. Now, Blake and I had a pretty good debate about that. Don't make any kind of assumptions with an NHL PA CBA, not to mention all the trade and tariff business that is going on. So who knows where the economics will go beyond next year. But in the near term, do you see this facilitating trades? Are we going to have a busier deadline season because GMs know they've got some
wiggle?
They got some wiggle coming. in
Well,
July.
they do, but it depends on which ownership group you're talking to. If you're talking to one of the 7 Canadian guys, they're looking at the Canadian dollar, and now they're looking at the cap projections, and they're looking at their free agents, RFAs and UFAs, and all they're saying is it's going to be an expensive summer. That's what they're saying. And then furthermore, specific to the CBA agreement, I don't think this is getting enough interest. So there's a couple of areas one is a necessity. And the other one might be a little bit too pie in the sky. So the pie in the sky one is some sort of leveling of the discrepancy in taxation across the NHL, the 32 separate markets. Okay, well, you find clubs that are in high tax markets, and those are the ones that are looking for equalization. And then you ask the owners of the teams in the low tax brackets, and they're like, buzz off. Like, how do we manage that kind of stuff? So here's a phrase that we're going to learn and we're going to hear a lot of in the weeks and months ahead, and it's called competitive balance. And I don't really think it applies to Vancouver beyond the obvious and the Canadian dollar and the political uncertainty and all of that. I think it's more targeting Winnipeg, maybe Ottawa. I mean, there's only so many dollars you can glean and pull out of your local market before that imbalance starts to creep in. I mean, can Winnipeg afford a $100+ million payroll? No. So what is that revenue sharing model going to look like? And we've been assured in reporting that whatever the adjustments that are made that are needed to that revenue sharing model are coming from the owner's side, not out of bargaining with the players and the CBA. And, there's going to be pushback from some of the fat cat owners. Why wouldn't there be? I mean, hey, I don't think any of the big clubs are going to want to, prop up the Winnipeg Jets or any small market team in the NHL. But that, unfortunately, is going to be the reality, to push that salary cap well above $110 million.
When I saw you tweet that, Dregs, on revenue sharing, a shiver went up my spine because I know the potential there.
But give Winnipeg credit, guys. Winnipeg's spending $86 million as we speak right now. Yeah. You've got Ottawa at $84 million. Like, they're within an arm's reach of the cap limit. Now, again, 3 years from now, when it's going bump, we'll see where they're at. But really, when I'm looking at the price tags right now, there's 5 teams that to me aren't within an arm's reach. And that's San Jose, Minnesota, Calgary, Anaheim, and Columbus. Yeah. Those are the teams that just aren't spending right now. And that's a lot for building purposes too, right?
Yeah. So a couple of things to remember on Winnipeg. Number one, a lot of those commitments would have been made with a stronger Canadian dollar.
Yeah.
Number two, well, I know Mark Chipman is the managing partner there. His partner, David Thompson, is worth $71 billion. Like, he's the richest owner in the National Hockey League, far and away, could buy them everybody over several times.
Rich guys don't like to lose money.
No, I understand that. I understand that. But, let's remember, it's not just a Chipman equation there. They are backed by the biggest wallet on the block. And then lastly, Dregs, I wanted to ask you this. After we saw that absolute stunt, you talk about a day for an insider. How about Shams Charania on Saturday? Luka Doncic for Anthony. Like, this is real. Like, I'm actually going to tweet this out. People are going to think I'm hacked, and sure enough, they did. Superstar for superstar in the NBA. There was another big NBA trade there yesterday involving all-star, if not superstar players. There are 2 no-trade clauses in the NBA. LeBron James and somehow Bradley Beal. There are 270 plus players in the National Hockey League with some kind of trade protection. How did we get here? And is this going to be a CBA matter? Have you heard any scuttlebutt about putting a clamp down on the number of no trade clauses that are out there?
I haven't, and I'd be curious as you're talking, and I knew which direction that question was headed. What would be the concession if you're the players to give back on that? Right? Like, what do you need from the National Hockey League to claw back on that? And that's really what the essence of the Players Association is to, manage the best interests of the player. Well, any player, especially those players with a young family like JT Miller has, as we know, you fight hard for that no move clause. And the no move clause is, I don't know how many of those exist, like a blanket no move clause, probably more than we think.
Yeah, a lot fewer though.
Yeah. No trade clauses. I mean, they can be manipulated. The general managers they barely roll their eyes at that kind of stuff now, because you can pressure a player into going to where the best deal is simply by saying, okay, well, if you don't accept this deal, then I'm going to trade you over here. And it's probably not a whole lot better, although it's a team that isn't on your no-fly zone. I mean, there's always sorts of leverage points, but I don't think it'll be a big CBA item. I really don't.
The Rangers have 5 no moves.
No, I know.
On their own.
It's
Full
just
no
incredible.
moves.
You go to Puckpedia or one of the sites, and just the number of notations: NMC, NTC.
Dregs, before you go, Shams had to clarify this is real. Have you ever had to clarify when you tweeted out a trade, I'm serious, this is real? Do you remember anything close to that?
Not really, and this was pre-social media, but I kind of stumbled onto the Joe Thornton trade. I broke the Joe Thornton trade from Boston to San Jose. I'll divulge my source now, and it was the late, great John Ferguson Sr., who, by the way, I still have his number in my cell phone. He was such a good man.
Yeah.
But
Vancouverite John Ferguson Sr.
Yeah, I posted that on .ca at Sportsnet at the time. I wasn't even at TSN, and I laid in my basement in the fetal position.
Right. Please be right. Please be right.
Yeah, you're waiting for confirmation from either San Jose or from the Boston Bruins, and
oh man,
that was a tough one. So I didn't. Yeah, I mean, but that certainly would have been one if there had been Twitter, X, whatever social media that I would have had to have applied the qualifier to.
Yeah, and of course we had that day in 2016 with Subban for Weber and Larson for Taylor Hall. That shook us to our core. And on the no trade clauses, yes, NBA GMs have held the line more on them, but also 4 or 5 years of flat cap, whatever it was, Dregs. Because money wasn't in the system, players started taking trade protection.
Right, they don't get $20 million like the NBA players. So they got to get
exactly. Yeah. Awesome stuff. Thank you, sir. Until next Monday.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
So Carson Price from the Historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss, a Canadian-owned and operated company, and that is important these days, isn't it? With a history dating back more than 100 years, 5 locations in BC, Willowbrook and Langley, Coquitlam Center, Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Victoria, committed to customer satisfaction. Check out the large selection of Canadian mine diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. They got mine diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. For more information, go to benmoss.com. Ben Moss, for the love of jewelry. A busy weekend for Jeff Paterson and the RinkWide crew as they had 2 games to stick handle and 2 trades on a Friday night. He joins us now. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, guys.
We'll do it in piecemeal form. So the Miller trade drops.
This is the trade section. We'll do the game section.
Okay. The game section, and then the looking forward section. The JT Miller trade drops. And your reaction to it is what?
Yeah, not shocked, obviously, with all the smoke that had been around JT and the New York Rangers. And so did I expect it in the hours leading up to the final game of a road trip? Maybe not. But look, nothing gets people talking like trades. We saw that the numbers of our shows and the emergency shows you guys did over the weekend reflects it. City is still buzzing. I think everybody's still trying to make sense of exactly what went down and how it all went down and how does it affect the hockey club short-term and long-term. But I don't think anybody ever expected that the Canucks were going to outright win a trade involving JT Miller because he controlled the process. So for them to get Philip Hedl and to get a promising young defenseman, and I think the first rounder was the centerpiece there, and pretty clearly they had discussions from Pittsburgh, getting feelers or putting feelers out to know what the price was going to be to acquire Marcus Pettersson. So the deals, while separate, didn't happen in isolation, and so maybe the biggest surprise for me was late on a Friday night that the first rounder they acquired from the Rangers lasted, 2 hours?
Yeah.
When they got one for Bo Horvat, it was 30 days at the very least. Here it felt like 30 minutes, and poof, it was gone and on to trade number 2.
How did you feel about trade number 2?
Well, that was funny because as we were signing off RinkWide, and then there was this sort of cryptic text or tweet from Elliot Friedman, like, hang on, Canucks may not be done here on a Friday night. So, we're trying to steer a live stream show and not only gather the intel on what was going on, but process it in real time. It's difficult because at first you're hearing that they're acquiring Marcus Paterson. You know that he's an unrestricted free agent. So what's the cost there? And then, you're hearing other pieces involved in both directions. And so it took a while ultimately for all of the dust to settle there. And again, Patrick Johnson and I were on the air. So you don't really get a whole lot of time to sort of step back and digest it. Paterson was a guy that they had been attached to and certainly had kicked tires on for a while, so not surprised. You saw the quotes afterwards. Jim Rutherford sort of patting his own back that it's the second time that he's acquired this player and he really likes him. And that much is obvious. But now it's, can they sign him and at what cost there? So even though the trades went down this weekend, this trade story isn't officially over because we need to know the cost, the long-term cost for Marcus Pettersson. But based on one night, came as advertised. I thought he looked pretty good. I thought Filipino looked pretty good. I know we'll talk more about the game, but look, this guy slots in very certainly as the number 3 behind Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek, and you can start to see the vision of this management group that there's 3 guys in their 20s that form sort of the nucleus of a defense core that they think can start to move them in the right direction. We know that the defense as assembled this season has been a weakness, not good enough at an NHL level. So, a welcome addition in that regard. And now it's a question of how do you go about filling out? You got 3, but you need 6 on a nightly basis. How do you get from here to there?
So Patrick Alvin was asked this question on Saturday, and I'm going to effectively ask you the same thing. After the 2 weekend trades, are the Canucks a better team? How do you feel, Jeff?
Skill-wise, no. You don't replace JT Miller when he's at the top of his game. But as we know and we all watched, he wasn't anywhere close to that all season long here in Vancouver. Still, he's a better player than he showed for the 45 games or whatever it was that they got out of him this season. And I was glad to see that he got off to a quick start in New York. I do hope that he's able to. I mean, when he's on, he's one of the most engaging players in the NHL to watch. There aren't many JT Millers around. So they're going to miss him. They'll miss him in all situations. They're certainly going to miss him in faceoffs. They're going to be the fire and the passion that he brought. And the piece that I wrote at Canucks Army over the weekend was about his complicated legacy. And I said, really, we may not know the full legacy until this team gets back to the playoffs, because hopefully some of the other guys watched and learned from JT Miller that that's what it takes to get your game to that level at playoff time. And ultimately, they're going to miss a lot of what he brought when he was dialed in. So skill-wise, no. But defensively, yeah, they're probably a little bit better. And I think on balance here, the hope has to be subtraction of JT Miller and the black cloud that hovered over this group all season long, that they have paved a path forward here, and maybe that can allow others, Elias Pettersson, the original, but others as well, to flourish and find their game. And what a world when you have to distinguish between all of the Petterssons that now call Vancouver home.
10 games until the trade deadline. That's not that many games. How many of those games do they wait before deciding if there is another deal? And I don't think they're trading Elias Pettersson, but they do have cap space to theoretically spend futures on, maybe move the deck chairs around and get a second line center. Do you think they wait to see how Hedl does in that role? Do you think it's just a matter of time they're going to continue to fish? What do the next 10 games bring for the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, it's funny you mentioned 10 games, because as I sat there yesterday watching the Red Wings game and recognized that it's game 52, you do the math. There's only 30 games to go in the regular season. Like, it doesn't feel to me like we should be that close to the end of the year, and 30 is still a significant portion, but 52 down, 30 to go, and 10 of them, as you said, up until the trade deadline. I have to think organizationally that the plan is now to try to get EP40 up and running and cooking for the remainder of this season. I don't see him moving before the trade deadline. And I really hope that the Canucks make it to the playoffs, because the playoffs are fun. They're great for the city. They're great for what we do in this business. And ultimately, they are the great determining factor of where guys are in their ability to elevate their games and make players around them better. And we know that just didn't happen for EP40 in the playoffs last year. So I want this management group to have a broader resume to examine Elias Pettersson in the playoffs. And I think, it would be organizationally, it'd be a catastrophe if this group falls short, but they are below the playoff bar with 30 games to go. And I think the Calgary Flames made themselves a little bit better with their trades last week. And so, where does it go from here? We'll find out. But I do wonder, Rutherford and Alvin were so active on the trade front a year ago. They'd been relatively quiet since the Eric Brandstrom deal on the eve of the season. Do they think they've got their mojo back? Do they have their swagger? Did they strut into Rogers Arena this morning and say, hey, that was fun. Let's keep this going. So I don't think they're satisfied. I think that was one of my takeaways again from Patrick Alvin. And yes, he sort of waffled on the question about are they better? All of a sudden, now they have a little bit of a surplus on the back end. The Carson Soucy healthy scratch to me is fascinating. That wasn't a trade chip or a trade piece that I necessarily had considered prior to this, but DPD looked pretty good and has in his 3 appearances so far. You got Derek Forbort as well. Like all of a sudden there's a logjam on the left side with Marcus Pettersson here. Carson Soucy can slide to the right, but do you want to be paying $3.25 for a third pairing defenseman, even if the cap is going up? So I just wonder, was this a one-off? Is that going to be enough to snap him to attention and raise his game? Or ultimately, are the Vancouver Canucks looking to perhaps move on from Carson Soucy sooner than anybody really had thought they might be?
Yeah, because they move on mistakes quickly, as Danton Heinen, Vincent Desharnais, Daniel Sprong, and others can attest. And also, like, Jeff, in a game where Hughes was scratched, you scratched Carson Soucy. Like, that was...
And a big strapping defenseman at the trade deadline, guys. As we know, boy, do GMs love them some big strapping defensemen at the trade deadline. So if you are thinking about trading Carson Soucy, it would have to be something else in addition. But Soucy and a first... Does that start to get you a second-line center?
Let's not forget, they gave him a full no-trade clause.
Right, and that is an important piece of the puzzle. But, as we've seen, if he's going to be a spare part here and not playing and get bumped further down the depth chart, does he look for an opportunity elsewhere? So, you're right.
He's only got the 1 year left. He's only got the 1 year left, and he'd like to... earn one more contract, and it's hard to earn one more contract when you're not playing.
For me, the best case scenario here is that he recognizes he hasn't been good enough, takes this like the pro that he is, and slides over to the right side. Like, be better than Noah Juleson at the very least, even as a left-handed shot. I know they like their lefty-righties, but I think there is room for Carson Soucy here, but it may not be on the left side.
Yep.
And I'm okay with that if he's okay with that, but ultimately... it's on him now. I mean, the coach didn't just scratch him. He pretty much carved him after the game as well and said, like, this is a guy that we need to be a whole lot better. And they do. It's been an off year. It's been a weird year for him because last year we didn't talk about him much because he just showed up, kept quiet, did his job, did it effectively. And boy, year over year, when we talk about it hasn't been the same for so many guys last year, mostly that conversation is about offensive players, but it has not been the same defensively for Carson Soucy.
I'm with you about sliding him over to the third pair right side. I also should know, I know we're all drunk on DPD today, but young players will probably have some step backs as this goes forward. I'm not sure he is absolutely an every night regular just yet, plus the injury factor, and we're seeing that with Quinn Hughes. So I still think he can be a serviceable piece for the Vancouver Canucks. I think Tocchet picked a most interesting time to healthy scratch because he really put it in lights, as you say, Jeff, after the game and because of Quinn Hughes' absence.
It should be noted, too, Carson Soucy turns into a 12-team no-trade list on July 1st. So if you're Patrick Alvin, you could go up to him and say, listen, we're going to trade you in the summer anyhow. Would you like to give us the 12-team no-trade now, and we'll work off that going to the trade deadline.
Yeah. Or you just keep him around because you think you're making a playoff run and he's depth and familiar with the system.
And he's a good guy to have in the playoffs. I'm not a Soucy hater at all, to a strong degree, but you got to trade something to get something, right?
And Jeff's absolutely right. The pro that he is, he has been a pro here.
No,
Jeff, I couldn't help but notice, but we had forwards, most specifically Filipino, we had forwards at speed with the puck on their stick.
Honestly,
entering
tears
the
of joy.
offensive
Tears of
zone
joy. Yes.
last night, Jeff. Philip Hedl was like teaching a class, a lesson on how this is done last night, and the coach was talking about it in the aftermath. The Canucks as a pacey rush team, Jeff, a moment or two, because it has been too long since we've been able to talk about this element of the game.
Yeah, and it's noticeable. And I think part of that is that the baseline was pretty low. So you bring in a guy that can move about the ice, and Drew O'Connor as well. And actually, I thought in the first period, noticed O'Connor and his speed and his willingness to get in on the forecheck and the work that he did. Didn't figure in the first goal, but played a role in it, certainly, to get in and pressure Alex Lyon, the Detroit goaltender. So I know that Tocchet had high praise for O'Connor as well, limited role, but flanking Kiefer Sherwood, a couple of guys that aren't afraid to get in on the forecheck and hound some pucks. So maybe want to see more of that. I think a lot of us thought that a combination of Kiefer Sherwood and Dakota Joshua at some point this season would be intriguing, but boy, and we don't have to spend too much time, but it's tough to watch Dakota Joshua these days. Coming off his second lengthy absence, and you just wonder if he's going to launch at all this season or if it's going to take a full summer and getting back. But on Hedl's front, you're right. It was fun. Like, there were a couple of rushes that you could see developing as he picked up the puck in the neutral zone and thought, hey, he's not going to dump it in and chase after it. He's going to take it and go with it and control entry and those types of things. And then the play to get the goal. And look, I loved his celebration. Ultimately it's a 2-2 goal in game 52. But for this guy, first game after getting traded for the first time in his National Hockey League career, recognizing he's getting an opportunity to play higher and play more than he was in New York, up over 20 minutes on the night, and play into the crowd base or the fan base and the crowd afterwards. I love that. Like, why not? Ultimately, it's supposed to be entertainment. They haven't been terribly entertaining on home ice, so give the people what they want. And yes, we'll see if it changes the ultimate dynamic, because in the end, it didn't change the outcome in overtime yet again. Seen that story way too many times this season. But a promising start. I thought promising start for all three of the new guys that, when I talked to Drew O'Connor on Sunday morning at the rink, he had this 10,000-mile stare. Like, if I had asked him what city he was in and what time and what day it was, I'm not sure he would have known the answer. And he said, I haven't even processed this, to be honest. Traded for the first time in his career. Said he got a phone call from Kyle Dubas at 11 o'clock on Friday night. And on Saturday morning, he's packing up his life and moving it to a new country and across the continent. And then on Sunday, he's playing. So he said he was going to play on instinct, and that's really all you can ask of these guys in the first night. There'll be time for systems here. But I think all of these new players acquired have to treat these games this week as a 4-game road trip and then get to the Four Nations break and sort of decompress at that point. I know the Canucks didn't win, but individually, I think there were some things to like in the debuts of all three of those guys, but you can understand. And I just thought O'Connor was, he was honest. He was like, I haven't even processed it. I'm in Vancouver. Here I am. Let me play.
What'd you make of the deployment? Because I love that line, but it has an effect on the top six as well. What'd you make of just the lineup combinations in the game?
Wasn't surprised that Hedl was given that opportunity. It was a question of who was going to play on his wing, and it gets pretty thin on the wings, as we've seen for much of this season. So no issues with Garland. I thought those two had some chemistry. Dakota Joshua, as I just said, it's a struggle for him. I thought maybe Höglander was going to get a chance to play, and maybe he will still there. Then you got Suter, and how does a guy go 23 games without scoring and then all of a sudden flip the switch and get 3 in his last 4? Like, where was Pius Suter for a 6-week stretch there? Better player than the numbers indicated, but good to see him contributing again here. So I didn't mind that. And then that left a fourth line of Teddy Bluger with Höglander and Karlsson. But of course, all roads and all conversations take you straight to the top of the lineup. And that was the disappointing night, or part of the night, while there were sort of these new presents to unwrap and we were all locked onto them. Same old for EP40 and his wingers. I thought it was a really tough night for Jake DeBrusk. Besser had the early opportunity, had the 3-on-1 that he whistled wide. And I didn't mind him holding on and shooting the puck in that situation. He had Forbert and Joshua. Those were his options to pass to. So of the three, I don't mind the fact that Brock elected to hold on, but hit the net, make the goalie make a save there.
He fanned on the one right on the doorstep too, right? When he's fed right to the crease edge
the
there, and he
there
didn't
were
get
a couple
all
of opportunities there.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that game, welcome to Vancouver, new guys. This is a team that can do some good things, but struggles to ultimately put the puck across the red line that matters the most. So good for Hedl for scoring, but even he said, the way they controlled the play, the underlying numbers, they dominated Detroit. And they should have. The Wings had played the night before, 3-4 for them at the end of a Western road trip. Canucks did a lot of good, but at the end of the night, did they win? No, they didn't. And so in that regard, their struggles continue here.
Okay, last question, Jeff, and it's a fastball here. Understand your exchange with Marcus Pettersson on his nickname fleshed out what we all probably suspected. Yeah, the Pens called him Petey. Can't be Petey here.
No,
apparently the play-by-play guy in Pittsburgh calls him Dragon or the Dragon, but of course we slay dragons at Rogers Arena. We don't house them. This is not the house of the dragon. This is the Dragon Slayers. So
right.
MP3, MPD, RePD, 3PD, where are you at here on Marcus Pettersson's nickname?
Well, and of course, again, none of this is in a silo when you have two other guys with the same last name because and I wasn't in the room afterwards, but apparently DPD was asked about all of this as well. And he said, well, somebody's come up with a new nickname for me, but I'm not going to tell you because I don't really like it. Did you catch Rick Tocchet drop a junior in his post-game press conference?
A junior?
And he corrected himself quickly, but I think he may have let the cat out of the bag a little bit that maybe they're going that way. I'm sort of with DPD on that one. I don't know that junior is necessarily the best.
It's diminishing.
For him.
It's diminishing.
But
it's not his son.
Yeah.
It was a fun exchange with Marcus Pettersson. The first few questions were about the trade and adjusting and everything else, and then there was sort of a break in the scrum, and so I just said, look, please tell me that your nickname is not Petey. And he just had this look of resignation as the truth sort of bubbled to the surface, and he was like, yeah, it is. Knowing full well that he was the second guy walking through that dressing room door with that nickname, and it probably wasn't going to work here. So, I'm fascinated and find it kind of amusing that we got a hint on the road trip where, I guess in his debut at home against Washington, that DPD was going to get an E on his jersey. Now Marcus gets an M on his, but the OG is just Pettersson.
Just Pettersson.
So... it's confusing on that front as well.
The other name game is Vittorio Mancini. That's how he's listed on the Canucks website. Are we going Vittorio?
On the drive when cheers went up along Commercial Drive when they found out the Canucks had acquired Vittorio. Yes, and of course on the same day that Phil DiGiuseppe had cleared waivers and was sent back to Abbotsford.
Yeah, so. Otherwise the all-Italian team, right? DiGiuseppe and Vittorio Mancini. Alas, only one at a time.
He's here. I wonder if they do want to get a look at him. He's played 15 games for the Rangers, and even though he doesn't project as an offensive guy, he got 5 points in his 15 NHL games. He thought it had gone really well. Liked his camp and said that he's made the most of his opportunities, but was shocked when he got traded. But I had a good chat with him yesterday, and we talked about this a little bit on RinkWide, but a really fascinating story that his father is fairly high up in USA hockey on the development side, once worked for the Edmonton Oilers in player development. His dad coached the South African men's national ice hockey team. I didn't know that there was one, quite frankly, but the dad's had, an interesting coaching background, and so Victor, I think is how we're going to go with Victor, but
I'm interested in his story.
He played 2 years at junior in Sweden.
Yeah.
I don't see many guys with junior eligibility going that way to play in their teen years, but he said that came through. I asked him about it yesterday, and he said that was through my dad, that he was friends with coaches over there, and after some discussion, they felt that was going to be the best path for him for his development, and then COVID hit, and looking for places to play, and he stuck with it. So 2 years of junior hockey over in Sweden before coming back in North America.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I know eventually the family got to Saginaw, Michigan, where there is a OHL team and a fair bit of hockey, but he's born in the Upper Peninsula, the UP of Michigan, this itty-bitty town, which is almost like a peninsula inside of the peninsula. near Lake Superior. It is awfully snowy up there. It is very much like Canada. In fact, that could be our 11th province if this continues.
Oh, yeah.
The Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Anyways, looking forward to getting to know Vittorio Mancini a little bit more.
Let me just say this, that I shook hands with him, and he's one of those guys, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well. Like, I wasn't sure I was getting my hand back.
Right. It just disappears.
Just enveloped. He just had the meatiest, biggest handshake. So he's a big dude. He is. And again, I think, not a throw in this deal. That Canucks need help on the right side. I think they see him as an intriguing prospect. And the fact that he's here, I do wonder, 3 games to go before the break. We talked about the issues on the right side. Do they plug him in and give him a look? I kind of hope they do. So we'll see where it goes for all of these new guys. But kind of a curious case with an interesting background when it comes to Victor Mancini.
Pat Quinn hands. Remember shaking hands with the big Irishman?
Very, very much.
Just like, okay, where's my hand in there? Thanks, Jeff. Until next week, or until later this week.
All right, guys. Thanks.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
So Carson Price from the historic Wall Center, where you extend your game night with a staycation in downtown Vancouver. Book a Carson Price exclusive rate here at the Wall, 604-331-1000. Tell them we sent you some blackout date supply based on availability. You can text this show, 778-402-9680. Email live at carsonprice.com. All of it to the Great Clips inbox. Great Clips.
It's going to be great.
Do you think it's going to be great for the Dallas Mavericks going forward? Just when you thought the NHL and massive trade activity might just get a little bit of that spotlight in the weekend between the conference championship games and the Super Bowl, the Dallas Mavericks and LA Lakers are like, hold my beer.
Crazy.
And what people are calling the biggest NBA trade ever. Like, you can find NBA superstars who force their way to new markets via trade. LeBron did that, Shaq, Wilt, Kareem. There's a number of those examples. You can find big trades where a salary cap basically pushed somebody at Russell Westbrook once upon a time. You can also do the looking back.
Kawhi Leonard.
You can also do some of the like looking back trades, like Vlade Divac for Kobe Bryant, a high school Kobe Bryant once upon a time. But superstar for superstar like that,
especially a guy that just he was a dream for the Dallas organization in terms of resonating with fans. And then to hear now the reporting that they were concerned about conditioning going forward,
and it's not
unfounded. Not unfounded. Like it's ballsy for them to make this decision, to be honest. And actually, I don't blame him for it. He was showing signs of laziness with regards to conditioning.
Also wincing, and he's hurt. He's been hurt since Christmas Day. Also, like his attitude seems to have soured a little bit. I mean, take a look at how often he was griping with officials.
And is LeBron going to MJ him now in practice? Is LeBron going to be on him and be like, "Let's go"?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Like you and I are old enough to remember when Barkley got traded to the Suns for a pretty, a package that stood out. We're also old enough to remember like trades like Mark Aguirre for Adrian Dantley and Dominique Wilkins for Danny Manning. Like those were big trades in the 80s and 90s. But this thing is next level.
And there's been like
this was their Weber Subban trade, but I would argue even both guys were more accomplished than Shea Weber and PK Subban.
Bigger than that
at the time, right?
Yeah. Although I honestly think Anthony Davis went to LA and died. Like honestly, he was a brand name. He was a face of the league. And it's funny, he goes to the Los Angeles Lakers, and I feel like he disappears. So maybe it's a good chance for him to sort of have a final chapter of his career too. So.
Yeah, he's having a good season, although he is hurt, and he absolutely was trying to survive there in the LeBron shadow, which is immense. I gotta say though, the memes yesterday morning was a spectacular morning on X. Like, I cannot quit X when I have a morning like is stuck in because of the snow. Just looking at All the memes. Imagine the phone call. Maps, we want AD. Lakers, not available. Maps for Luka. Lakers, AD will be there in the morning. People memeing Luka Doncic saying he looks like James Corden, and sure enough, there are photos of James Corden in Laker gear. Did you see the one, pardon my take, Luka Doncic, Austin Reeves, Dalton Neck on the Lakers, and a photo of exciting whites from your liquor aisle? The wine department.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. On and on it went, including this one. Our nation has a Kennedy missing his brain, and now a white man from Dallas is about to help LBJ win. Welcome back, 1963.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Closer to home, a big signing. Justin McInnis, the CFL's leading receiver in 2024, has signed a 2-year contract extension with the Lions, as Nathan Rourke restructured his deal, although he's still signed through 2026. The Leos get busy in the free agent front. They get defensive tackle Dwayne Hendricks from Hamilton, cornerback Dante Williams from Saskatchewan. Chris Slugger, the American offensive lineman, has also re-signed there. But there are losses as well. They've released receiver Keon Hatcher, weren't able to come to an agreement with him. Adrian Green, the young Canadian safety who started games for them, seems on his way to Calgary. This is all the legal tampering window. Things will be official in some time. And then around the league, Dominic Rhymes released by the Red Blacks. He played all 18 games at 1,000+ yards last year. You wonder about maybe reuniting there if they can't get Hatcher and Catoy, if they can't keep Hatcher and Catoy. And then how about Ed Hervey and the Edmonton Elks? As much as 8 starters added here between the 2 free agents they resigned from their own side of things, and then adding defensive tackle Jake Ceresna, who's been awesome for Toronto, Canadian receiver Keon Julian Grant, Canadian defensive end Robbie Smith, Canadian DB Terrell Ford, Canadian offensive lineman David Beard, American defensive tackle as well. I don't think Edmonton's been a pushover and a laughingstock the last few years, but they're getting better. We'll see what Calgary does, but this is going to be, I think, a deeper, tougher West Division for BC when they get going in June.
A little bit of news, or possible news, from the Glass City account on Twitter for the Vancouver Whitecaps. Rumors that they're interested in Le Havre forward Emmanuel Sabi. He's American U.S. men's national team, born in Italy. He hasn't had great success in League One in his last 2 seasons, but he had some better success playing where? In the Danish Superliga, which is, of course,
Jesper
Sorensen's stomping grounds previous to this. So those dots connect nicely, and he's young, he's 27, so a chance maybe for him to start over a little bit and get a reset button pushed.
Then there was the ominous sentence in a long Rick Westhead tweet from TSN. Vancouver's MLS team, which is now for sale, may move to the U.S. without a new publicly funded stadium. A person familiar with the matter told me, well, we have a publicly funded stadium.
It's entirely publicly funded.
Yeah, it's publicly operated as well, and it was renovated at a cost of just shy of $500 million within the last decade, 15 years. So, I don't know. I don't see that. I don't see that happening. And in fairness, this was a sentence on a longer tweet about the tariff situation and what that could
impact on sports.
Yeah, impact on Canadian. Sports. One thing we know for sure, the best party in town is coming to BC Place later this month, February 21st to 23rd. The HSBC Rugby 7 celebrating 10 years here in Vancouver. It's the longest running event of this size and scale in our city. And the best teams in the world will all be there. 12 women's teams, 15 men's teams, both Canadian sides. 3 full days of jam-packed rugby and partying. Bring your friends, your fancy dress. Single-day tickets are on sale now. The Friday tickets start from $45 plus fees for the fan that wants to cram everything in to one day. Enjoy the next level rugby experience. VIP tickets, $130 a day, gets you the best seats in the house, player access, a private bar and lounge, in-seat food and beverage. Tickets on sale now at vansevens.com, and sevens is to be spelt out. We fired 3 Surrey Mitsubishi poll questions over the course of the weekend. We're just going to go results here. I'm not going to get too deep into the replies. We usually do replies every day. Forgive me. It's just been a lot today. How do you feel about the Canucks trade with Pittsburgh? Like it, dislike it? What did the people say?
They said they liked it.
Yes, percentage?
68.
66. Very good, Blake. Best part about the JT Miller trade? Hedl, Mancini, cap space, or the first-round pick? Oh, the first-round pick. We hardly knew you.
Hedl.
What? No.
No?
He just got 9% of the vote.
Wow.
Cap space got 58% of the vote there.
Huh?
The first-rounder got 25. Mancini almost got as much as he got 8. And then do you like the JT Miller trade? That was the first one to fire when we were all so innocent and didn't realize Marcus Paterson was coming to town. Yes or no? Do you like the JT Miller trade? The people said?
They said no.
Correct. Percentage?
58.
54. Pretty good,
Yeah.
Blake. More often than not, they like the trade because they want to like the trade.
But they knew they lost the best player
Well,
in the trade, and so they went with that.
Which is we're gonna give the one comment to Josh the Zamboni guy, a regular listener contributor, but also he sums it up. The return, no. It had to happen though. So yes. Pretty good, Josh. Errors and omissions. I have 3 from this weekend.
Which emergency show?
Well, actually, on Friday,
From emergency weekend.
on Friday on the regular show, when we were talking about the new CBA, I said I thought teams would push for compliance buyouts. Shouldn't have said compliance because with the cap jumping that high, everyone I think is going to be in compliance. I do think you're going to have smaller market teams, though, that view it as a opportunity to shed a bad contract off their books, and they're going to say to their colleagues there, hey, look, we're not going to be spending to this limit anyways, but here's our budget. We'd love to get out of this deal. So I should have just said buyout. I called him Vincent, not Victor, in a tweet on Saturday, Mancini. And we failed when talking about the free agent defenseman that they could have gone on. This was Saturday's emergency show. Jake Wallman is out there as well, San Jose, and a rental on the trade market. Anything from the inbox or to self-report?
No, nothing I've got.
Perfect show. Yeah. Perfect. 3 of them. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. Facebook, YouTube, and Blue Sky, live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time weekdays. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us talking about. Keep it local.